You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact. Oh, no, not this week. Just so everyone understands, Adam and Joe at Six Music, Gene, his curtain twitching, Stuart in the wardrobe department, asking for leather. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we have been watching Darmok. It had a teleplay by Joe Minosky from a story by Philip Lozebnik and Joe Minosky. It was directed by Winner Kobe and first aired the week of September 30th, 1991. James, what's this one all about?
The Enterprise is on a mission to begin a new relationship with the Tamarians, a race who have been in contact with the Federation but have, up until now, not been understood. The trend continues with Picard unable to establish a meaningful dialogue. The Tamarian captain Dathon beams himself and Picard down to the planet, offering Picard a knife. Picard refuses to fight, but it is clear that is not the intention. While the Enterprise crew attempt to rescue their captain, the Tamarians are more than a match for them as they aim not to escalate to a battle. Picard begins to understand Dathon. His species talks in metaphors. Every situation references a story from their past. In their history, Darmok and Jalad bonded over fighting a beast at Tanagra, and Dathon has placed Picard in the same situation. When the captain finally understands, it's almost too late, as the beast fatally wounds Dathon. But on returning to the ship, Picard is able to use their form of language and begin communications.
Well, Alex, you'd never seen this episode before, but what I'd like to ask first is, what did you think of Picard's jacket?
Yeah, what on earth was going on with that?
Let me give you a big revelation. Patrick Stewart requested it.
Oh, he was fed up of it, the uniform giving him a bad back and racking up, I assume.
I think he just wanted to look cool, you know.
With his leather shoulder pads and turtleneck.
I genuinely think that is Patrick Stewart's idea of a cool action hero.
Could it be ribbed? To be fair, like I think I quite like variations on uniforms and stuff, and maybe they should have more. I often think they should have jackets and stuff for going down to planets, but this is a very strange one, because it's just like, oh, you're doing an important first contact and you've got your casual clothes on, and it does not last, this jacket. This is the only episode this version of it is featured in. The leather disappears very quickly.
It looks especially odd that just... Well, I have a special leather padded jacket, but not for the rest of you. Captain.
Yeah, I guess it's his version of Kirk's wraparound. But anyway, more importantly, what did you think of this episode?
I mean, it's clearly a very good episode. I'm not sure how we talk about it, because essentially it's one big word puzzle, really, isn't it? I mean, this is the Star Trek version of Only Connect. I don't... how do you analyse something? In the broad terms, there's not a huge amount of plot as such. There's a lot of piecing the puzzle together, which is very satisfying in and of itself. Just difficult to analyse.
It's incredibly Star Trek The Next Generation, this. And I would go as far as to say this is almost like its response to Star Trek The Original Series episode Arena, where Kirk goes on the planet and fights the Gorn. And in that episode, there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of action, there's finding ways to make weapons and ultimately who to win. Of course, in the end, a godlike alien race intervenes and it's all about finding peace after all. But this is about how can we communicate with those we don't understand. It's not about fighting. That is, the knife is held out at the start and no, I refuse it. And the alien race is also refusing it. They are not monsters in any way. So this is basically the 1980s version of Star Trek. How can we not fight? How can we talk when we have no common understanding? What is the way that we can actually learn? And I love that, because it's that development of Star Trek. I wonder what the episode where you're stuck on the planet with the alien would look like today. I imagine there would be a lot more explosions. Yeah, you're right. There's so little other texture to this episode. It's interesting. Even at the start, it's not like they're in the holodeck doing a mission about cracking codes in World War II or something like that, which you might expect. It's literally them saying, we're going to meet an alien race and they have difficulty communicating with people from the Federation. And then Patrick Stewart just going, well, communication's all about patience, isn't it? And that's the setup. There is no tortured metaphor. It is just, we're going here, we can't talk, we're going to go to the planet. And the B plot as well is just, well, it's not a B plot, it's just the other side of the same plot, with the people on the Enterprise going, we're going to try and work out this language. Troy and Data not using a database particularly effectively, and Riker saying, we're not going to shoot them yet. And
Worf saying, let's shoot them.
They do give up on that database very easily, don't they? I mean, I pity to think what their Excel skills are like. I mean, it doesn't feel like either of them are familiar with a VLOOKUP.
And it was just like, there are 47 entries. Like, oh, it's too many. Can't do anything with that.
I mean, I'm aware I work as an accountant, but 47 entries, it's not that much. That's quite easy to cross-reference. You know, I'd maybe take a look at each of the 47. Oh, I've heard 3. That's enough.
I feel like their search parameters weren't particularly good either. I mean, maybe you wanted to search for, given that these names did indeed exist within the Federation knowledge base, maybe Darmok and Jalad and Tanagra together, to see if anything came up with that.
They have one of the most powerful computers in the universe in Data, and they can't just upload these 47 instances up into his mind.
I mean, I recently, for different reasons, I watched The Royale, and he reads an entire book in seconds. So we know he can process this amount of information incredibly quickly, rather than sitting talking to a computer.
But, well, the Royale is a very engrossing book.
That's true.
It's a page turner.
Whereas this, it's like, I don't know, can't be bothered.
I don't care. They're all foreign. That's how I take it. But then the whole episode has a bit of I mean, the whole episode really, with them just talking English. I mean, clearly they don't understand you. They may be speaking English as well, but clearly the frames of reference for the language are completely different. It doesn't stop, especially Riker just talking at them. It's like that one uncle that you have that goes to France and goes into a supermarket and goes up to the guy in the counter, or goes to a boulangerie and goes, Pedro, I want this bread, but shorter and sliced.
But I guess there's an element of that, isn't it? It's like, if we talk slower and louder, maybe you will understand.
And there's an element of that from both sides as well.
Absolutely. It's the impatience you see, but to me this is an episode. I mean, it does feel a bit original series in a lot of ways, but yeah. it's so Star Trek. If you wanted to describe what Star Trek is to someone, this is the episode you might just sort of slide across the table and say, look, it's this. It's a lot of talking, but it's also something that they've not really done before on TNG. They've taken the language problem out of Star Trek with the universal translator, and now we can put that back on the table and go, okay, that language is important, communication is important, even if they are talking English. It allows them to do a different kind of story. I mean, if you think about it, if you break it down, the mechanics of this society, the mechanics of this language probably don't make any sense, but it doesn't matter because the story works.
Well, you say it doesn't matter, but let's take this apart a second. Because that was something that I was questioning. If their entire language is based on metaphor, and citing examples. How are they able to tell these stories to be able to come up with the examples to cite? Because I can well see that you could cite an example of something that you had directly experienced, but how does it pass down through generations?
When you're shown as a child the word dog, you're shown a picture of a dog. Surely that same format can be applied to a phrase.
What, you mean that this whole race just has very elaborate picture books?
Exactly.
I think it's also showing a sort of a different way of thinking. Like, they don't necessarily have the same reference points. And I think that's good, because in Star Trek very often, as you've said, perhaps particularly in the original series, well, actually not even just particularly in the original series, the alien races are very much an extrapolation of one element of human society, whether that's ancient Rome or Klingon as very vaguely, well, let's look east. And this feels like a kind of, we've built the alien race from the story up. It's not just, oh, capitalism's bad, let's make a point about that. It's slightly more nuanced than that. It's not massively nuanced.
On a side note, their plan, or the captain's plan for communication, I get the element that he believes that this is so important, it's worth sacrificing his life. But, I mean, it's not a great plan, is it? Let's be honest. He turns up, he greets him with 2 knives. I mean, what's wrong with a welcome hamper? Some nice cheeses, perhaps, a bottle of port.
There's no metaphor. There's no instance in their history of somebody turning up with a welcome hamper. It wasn't Darmok with the M&S basket.
You can pick at it if you really, really want to.
Ah, the mantra of this podcast.
Well, I think
you end up looking like Phil Farrand.
You take that back.
So I mean, I guess the setup is, let us put ourselves in a dangerous situation where we both have a common enemy, and we have to fight that enemy, and we bond over it. Now, we've all done that in the workplace, haven't we? I'm sure we have decided we want to make a friend with someone, or maybe someone's new, so we've decided to say...
To take them into a room with an evil, invisible alien.
And let them fight it out in the Thunderdome. Yeah.
Perfectly normal thing to do. The alien, do you like Predator?
It's a very conveniently cheap alien, isn't it?
I bet it cost a fortune. But again, it absolutely does the job of being quite scary, understandable, and you can kind of stab it with a knife.
It did make me think of the Doctor Who episode, Vincent and the Doctor, with the alien's invisible this week. We had some models to pay for.
That turkey alien, when you did see it, I wish they just kept it invisible the whole time. So, I mean, what do you think of the performance here? It's Paul Winfield, who Star Trek fans will know from Star Trek 2, where he plays Captain Terrell, in that as well. I think a good performance. Obviously, he's limited in his dialogue, but I think you get across that idea of kinship, of misunderstanding and frustration. I think, this is a difficult performance under that makeup, and he gets across all those emotions and nuances.
No, yeah, I think it's good. I mean, it is a difficult one to do, and also because it can come off as quite comical done in the wrong way. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't some comical elements to it in this. I mean, the cold open finishes with him coming out with the knives, and it is half comical the way, because obviously they've clearly chosen someone and made him up in a way that it's clear this person isn't a fighter. So it is a fine balancing act, and it would very easily be possible to go quite badly wrong. And because of the lack of the plot as such, it would be a drag in different hands. But it's not here. It works. I mean, it helps that he's acting against Patrick Stewart. You've put one of your stronger actors.
And it's interesting that he's meant to be the kind of mirror for Picard, but the commander of the Tamarian ship he's almost analogous to Worf. You see him make threatening gestures, and he seems to be pushing for almost violence at times against them because they're not understanding. He's interpreting our characters the way that Worf is interpreting the Tamarians.
Also, it's clear that their intentions are peaceful, and they're under this same orders not to escalate it. And actually, it does seem like they have the superior technology in a lot of ways.
Is it that they have the superior technology, or is it that Riker is holding off for too long, essentially giving them too much leeway to attack in an effort to be diplomatic?
Perhaps. There's maybe an element of that, but I feel like the transporter scattering and then them taking out the shuttle, it's all done very deliberately and very much in order not to cause any massive amounts of harm, even if I guess the core idea could very much result in Picard's death because you're taking an old man down to fight an invisible alien. It does seem every act they do until it escalates towards the end when their captain has obviously died is done not to escalate the situation. And obviously Riker's kind of trying not to escalate the situation, but there is an element of these foreigners with their irritating ways have kidnapped our captain. It's a dangerous situation, but it seems like they could maybe be a little bit more patient.
If you look at the Tamarian side, they're just looking at the Enterprise and they're seeing them making threatening gestures. Okay, you have just abducted their captain, but you haven't done it for a bad reason. You've done it in the aims of being diplomatic. So from their society's view, they've done the right thing. So the Tamarian commander, he can easily look from their perspective at the Enterprise and see them as the threatening bad guy.
Yeah. And isn't that what it's all about? Not understanding each other and your intentions, and always looking for the best in people, which is something I think we encourage on this podcast. No?
No, most people are assholes.
What do you think of Picard's fire-lighting abilities? I'll be honest, I was quite disappointed. Take the phaser away from him, and he's got no survival skills.
Yeah, yes, I thought that seemed a little unbelievable. If there was one member of the crew that I thought would be able to do that.
You would think that Starfleet would teach that at some point. You know, they all go on away missions. They should know how to light a fire.
Also, if we're talking just momentarily about things that seem slightly unbelievable, when Picard does return to the ship and then speaks to the other ship and is speaking in their language, it's quite the leap he's made from just being able to piece together a couple of things to being able to have a reasonably extensive knowledge of their culture, or at least enough to convey the message. There's a jump there, isn't there? Or is it just me?
No, I felt there was also a jump because do you know what? I didn't notice watching it the first time, which was a few weeks ago for rescheduling reasons. But I watched it again yesterday, and I thought, oh, he's going to get more of this language at some point, isn't he? But no. But I suppose that the idea is that he was there for over a day and they spoke and listened. But yeah, I don't think he would be fluent enough to really get quite nuanced ideas across in that time, because it seemed like he only knew 3 phrases, and it's amazing he didn't just order a chicken sandwich and a Coke.
He largely relies on the give phrase, though.
Yeah, everything is based on that. Give me more. Give me more.
But yeah, I actually really like the ending. We see Picard not long after this. It was later TNG when he kind of became the action hero Picard, and here we see him returning to the bridge as the ship is about to be destroyed. It's in the heat of the battle, and he's armed with understanding and diplomacy, and he saves the day. That's Picard down to a T.
And then the final summation of the show is, perhaps the answer is in books. Save those libraries, kids. Although I do slightly question of, well, maybe if we encounter them again, we'll be better prepared if we know our own mythologies. Will you? I mean, they're still not going to have a frame of reference. You could use anything. You could use Riker awkwardly hitting on this ensign, and that would be an equally applicable scenario to something else from Greek mythology. It won't make any difference to their understanding. I get the sentiment, but
Sonia Gomez and Picard when the hot chocolate fell.
Chief Engineer Argyle in the engine room. His letters many.
The warp core, many puppies burning.
That's our trailer. I mean, if you were stuck and someone round the campfire in maybe a bad way, you're in a desperate situation, and they ask you to tell them a story, would your go-to be Gilgamesh?
I mean, I can't remember it coming up in Cubs.
I mean, I was really hoping you'd do like Star Wars or something like that.
No, now you're just reciting a scene from Return of the Jedi. That's what you're doing there. You're just thinking of C-3PO telling the story to the Ewoks.
Okay, what from our popular culture could Captain Picard have told?
There's a story that's very similar to our current situation, that involved 2 people who, once sure that they could come together, and in many ways still couldn't, had a barrier to overcome. Let me tell you the story of Love Thy Neighbour.
So, I guess, there's some transporter shenanigans. Do you think the Enterprise crew should feel guilt for that monster mauling the other captain to death because they locked Picard in a transporter beam for about 5 minutes?
That's going on O'Brien's record.
Is there anything of merit on his record at this point?
I don't know. They're about to transfer him to Deep Space Nine, which seems a bit of a terrible assignment if you ask me.
I mean, even his personal life. I mean, he's married, but they just seem to pick at each other.
To be honest, I think we've summed it up fairly well there. I mean, I think it's good. Do you know what else I think, though? I also think it's quite boring.
It's a tad overrated. It's a meme episode of Star Trek, isn't it?
I mean, you know where it's going fairly early on. It's like a murder mystery with a fairly obvious murderer. We're watching. We're just working through to the logical conclusion, but it doesn't mean the journey can't be unsatisfying. But yes, it might take in a few more longer stops than you necessarily need, but it still works.
I'm glad it's exactly the way it is, and it's exactly the way it should be. But it's not my favourite mode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. But I know it's very good. But I'm not sure I enjoy watching it as much as I enjoy watching many, many other episodes.
Good.
Right, well, that sums that up. let's go to Quickfire.
Quickfire.
This episode is notable as it's the only time a phaser beam is emitted from the main photon torpedo tube.
Yeah, Alex was just saying that beforehand, how annoyed he was about it.
Except it was corrected for the remastered version, which is the version we all watched. Because why would anybody watch those DVDs anymore?
I watched both. Rick Berman was reluctant to do this episode. It was in development for 2 years, but Michael Piller fought for it and thought it was a good idea. And he said, I just think Darmok is the prototype of what Star Trek should be. It dealt with a very challenging premise, and many of our best shows are scripts that have been around a long time. He created a whole language for that episode, and it's just astonishing. The episode worked on every level. It had the philosophy dealing with language and what it does for us, 2 great acting performances, it had a monster and a space battle. It had everything. And you know what? He's not wrong. It's got all of those ingredients that kind of make Star Trek work.
And Rick Berman retracted his disagreement after he saw the episode. Russell T Davies cited this episode as the inspiration for the 2008 Doctor Who episode Midnight, except for the fact that he's never actually seen Darmok. He just read the synopsis, and he never wants to watch the episode because he didn't think it would ever live up to the episode he gleaned from the plot.
You know what? Now you say that, I can absolutely see exactly how he's reached that. Now you say that.
To be fair, you know, the Robert Holmes wouldn't watch any other television because he didn't want to steal anything, so he would refrain from watching other sci-fi shows.
That's interesting, because I think a lot of the people working on Star Trek today have never seen a script before.
I was going to do exactly the same joke about Chris Chibnall. In Star Trek 365, Jeremy Noski is remembering the aftermath of the episode and talks about Gene Roddenberry's funeral and says, Gene Roddenberry died not long after Darmok aired. At the funeral service, Patrick Stewart mentioned Darmok in his memorial speech, saying that we'd just done an episode that referenced the Homeric hymns and the root metaphors of our culture. He used it as a way to validate and praise Gene's creation. Now, he says that, but it does sort of ring as, I'm very sad to see that Gene has died. We've just made a fantastic episode, however. You really should all watch it. It all counts to the ratings. Would anyone like to buy a CD? They're in the boot of my car. It's out in the lot.
I'm just happy that Gene Roddenberry lived long enough to see Picard's leather jacket.
It's what he would have wanted. I mean, I think we'll get to this at a different point, but I was just reading some of Gene Roddenberry's Wikipedia, and I sent this to you guys, and he had made a video of himself to be played at his own funeral. What a guy. I mean, that's some forward planning for you. That's the sort of thing that only happens in bad films normally, but he made that happen.
What was he doing in the video?
Oh, I mean, I would love to see this video. I mean, I'm sure it's never been seen, unless there's probably bootlegs sold at conventions. Joe Manosky, he also said he was struggling with the episode, but Michael Piller had just seen Dances with Wolves. You know, it's okay to name your references, and was blown away by the scene in which Kevin Costner and the Native American warrior sat around a campfire who don't speak a word of each other's language but finally make themselves understood. Michael announced, that's it, one man, one alien, alone on a planet around a fire. They don't know each other's languages, they struggle to overcome their differences, and finally break through to communication. And maybe there's a big monster. Great. That's what you need from your showrunner. This is the first appearance of Ashley Judd as Ensign Robin Leffler. She will be back later on. You probably didn't notice her because she just said, "Yes, Commander," but she gets more to do. Well, thank you for listening to another First Contact. We'll be back again soon talking about Ensign Rowe. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Well, I tell you what they didn't correct. They didn't correct the fact the stars go in the wrong direction at the end, though, did they? Oh, hang on. Hang on. No, don't tell me. He hasn't put it in his bloody book,
Are you looking
has
to
he?
see if Phil Farrant has said that?
Motherfucker. Yes. All right. I withdraw it.
You can't withdraw it. You are slowly turning into Phil Farrant.